Love. Love is where we're at in our study of faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these, Paul said, is love. So, kind of intimidating to preach on love, as it has been with hope and faith. Where do you begin? If you love me, you will keep my commandments. I'm thinking about how many times did I hear that growing up? If you love me, you will keep my commandments. It would be interesting to know also how many times I have said that. In particular, whenever I was talking to a friend or someone kind of in the religious realm, because quite frankly, I knew a lot of people that would profess to be Christians, but the lives that they were living Monday through Saturday was telling a different story. I heard this a lot. It was ingrained. And also, to be fair, I would see this. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. Do you know that this is actually stated several times, just in different forms? I'm not going to read through all of those. It's the same concept. The last two actually were written by the Apostle John, because there are those in his day that had a different explanation of who Jesus Christ actually was, that was not consistent with the gospel message, and it had a bad application in the lives of saints. And so in his letters, he was stressing that Jesus was the Son of God. We are to follow him, to obey and love him, and to love one another. All of those other passages in John 14 and 15, those are in one setting. The night that Jesus will be betrayed, he's speaking to his apostles. But brethren, think about this. They were to go into the world. The Spirit in particular was going to be working through them to preach the good news, bringing the message of sin, righteousness, and judgment. He needed them to love him and thus be obedient to him. So he was stressing that. I want to be super clear, because you may be sensing that I'm going somewhere with this. Do I take issue of passages like John 14:15? How could I take issue with a passage like John 14:15? I will never take issue with someone saying, if you love Jesus, you will obey him. Not in a million years will I ever take issue with that. But what I think is important for us to say, because many times we say it privately, one-on-one, but it needs to be said from the pulpit. But we need to make sure that we are harmonizing and keeping balanced and in context and think things through. Because a thing in and of itself can be correct, but if it is overemphasized, something else falls prey to it. The pendulum swing. Why do you obey God? Because you love him. And the motive matters. If you get so hyper-focused on telling someone, obey, 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 obey. If you don't obey him, you don't love him. If you don't obey him, you're going to hell. Obey, 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 obey. And you forget to ever talk about the motivator behind it, you're going to get yourself in a world of hurt. So just as Paul had an audience in his day, and John had an audience in his day, I have an audience before me, and I can tell you what we struggle with. We're not struggling in the U.S. with those of the Jewish faith trying to pull people back to the old law. I don't encounter that a lot. I think that sometimes Calvinism has principles that are akin to the Gnostic teaching, but I'm not running into Gnostics. I'm running into brethren who are struggling with the concept of love and how that fits into their daily lives. I have a very simple question. What drives you? What motivates Monday through Saturday. I brought this passage up before. I would love to read it again. 1 John chapter 4. I'll begin in verse 15. 1 John chapter 4. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. So we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. Brethren, we have come to know the love that God has for us. We see it not only in the New Testament, we see it throughout the Bible. We see it, of course, in particular, in Jesus Christ and his sacrificial love. Okay? We have come to know that, therefore we are called to love. If we, listen to this, if we abide in that love, we abide in the Father, and the Father makes his home with us. Verse 17, by this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment, because as he is, so also are we in this world. Here's verse 18. Pay close attention to this. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. Love takes the initiative. God did not love you because you're always so lovable. God did not love you because you took the initiative. He reached out to you first, and he loved you, and he saved you. Why would you fear that God on the day of judgment? If you fear judgment, John says, then you have not been perfected in love. I'm going to say something super bold. If you are afraid of God, there is always something wrong in two ways. Because either you have not come to know him as he is, so you need to correct how you're viewing him, or you are rebellious, and that's not good, and therefore you are supposed to be fearing him, but that's not good. There's a problem. Anytime you are afraid of God, there is a problem, because you either don't know him or you are rebelling against him. Those people who walk in the light, and we all stumble, see, but those people who walk in the light do not fear God. We have got to get past the point of fearing someone saying, you don't obey him, therefore you're going to hell, versus you're not obeying him, I'm afraid you don't love him. Do you see the difference between the two? I want to commend you for just a moment, in particular those who are older. One of the most beautiful things that, and we talked about this, some of us were able to gather together, on our Wednesday night get-together. One of the most beautiful things that I have seen in my life are those older than me say, whenever I sin, it hurts because I really feel like I've let down God, my Father. And you have said that. More than one of you, I have heard you say that. And that doesn't mean that the others have not said that. Motivation matters, brethren. You get into this word, love. So I was really curious. On Friday, as I was wrapping up my lesson, the manager for Starbucks was sitting by me, and he's a religious fella, and I said, I want to quiz you on something, on love. He's like, okay. I said, when you hear about love, what do you think about? And have you ever heard about like different Greek terms being used? He's like, yeah. I said, like agape and phileo and like a higher form of love, yeah. And I'm just quiet, and I let him walk me through what his experience with love is. And this actually was good for me to hear, because his experience was the same experience that I've had. There was no difference in it. And I'm going to kind of express to you where I think we need to be careful about this. I'm going to show you what my experience has been, and you're going to do what you will with it. So there are different forms of the word love. So in other words, in your Bible, you're going to see the English word love many times. Well, sometimes there's actually different Greek words behind that word love. And sometimes that love is romantic love. Sometimes it's love that's a friendship. Sometimes it's brotherly love. Sometimes it's love that carries primarily an emotion with it. And then sometimes there's a love that carries the idea it's a principle of duty. And that is agape. And agape is the term that is used more than any in the New Testament. So you can understand why we really emphasize agape love. Agape. It's one source. In this kind of stuff, I put sources up. Guys, in other words, that are worth listening to. Guys this is their element. They know the language, or they know the topic in and out. They say agape carries the idea of moral goodwill which proceeds from esteem, principle, or duty rather than attraction or charm. Agape means to love the undeserving despite disappointment and rejection. The reason why we call agape the higher love is because it works like this. I am going to do what's best for you because it is the right thing to do, and I'm not doing because of what you've done for me or because of who you are or even because you'll appreciate it or even return it to me. I will agape you because it's the right thing to do. It's a devoted love. So you can understand why we have stressed agape. And we say it is the one that is typically used in the New Testament. Okay? It's not an emotional kind of love, we say. It's a love based on duty. Do you hear that? Now, I would be a pretty foolish guy to downplay agape love. Because you need agape love. Let me tell you my shortcomings. I love to love people who love me. I think Jesus said something about that. And let me tell you why. It's not because whenever I love someone that's lovable because they praise me, sometimes that does happen. You know, you ever love someone and they're just doting on you, and you're like, that felt kind of good. That felt good. But for me, what it is I love to love someone who appreciates being loved. Do you know who I really have a hard time loving? Someone who thinks that it's owed them, someone who feels entitled, someone who my love is never enough. Do you understand what I'm saying? That kind of person, I'm like, well, that's just a wasted love on you. You think everyone owes you. What do you bring to the table? I'm never good enough. I struggle with that. And Jesus is like, all right, this is exactly what I was teaching against. Thank you, Sean, for admitting that. So Sean loves those who love him. I'm calling you to love your enemies because many times they will not reciprocate the love and they couldn't care less about you. Enter into kingdom discussion. So it is a powerful kind of love. But I now, having said all that, I got to say something else. I try not to emphasize variations in the Greek for two reasons, and let me tell you why. Number one, because those who actually know what they're talking about, I am getting a clear picture again and again and again. They're saying, you need to stop doing that. You need to stop doing that. People that don't know the Greek misuse it many times. First of all, in other words, they're just simply saying you don't know it well enough to dabble in it. And also, sometimes you're going to make distinctions that were never meant to be made. So like I remember the first time I was speaking to a guy who knows the Greek. And he told a whole bunch of us younger men, he says, you need to stop getting into the Greek. He says, I want to, and it was actually one of the most encouraging discussions. He says, you have learned men who have translated this so you don't have to know the Greek. And then he went to the passage which thou shalt never touch. He went to John chapter 21. So like all of us non-Greek guys, we know like a handful of Greek terms. We know ecclesia, that's church. We know phileo and agape because of John 21, what I'm about to talk to you about. We also know oinos because when we get into our debatable discussion on wine, we like to get, we don't, that's like it, that's it. He says, John chapter 21, Jesus says, Peter, do you agape me? Peter says, Lord, I phileo you. That's a emotional friendship love. Peter, do you agape me? Lord, I phileo you. Peter, do you phileo me? Lord, I phileo you. And this guy, along with many others, are like saying, guys, it's just not there. And also, if you actually think it through, if he's trying to call him to a higher love, he didn't end with a higher love, yet he's putting him to work. It doesn't make sense. What does make sense in context is that Peter asked him, what should you be picking up from that passage? Peter asked him, or was asked 3 times if he loved him after he had denied him 3 times. Jesus is dealing with it, and then he's putting him back to work. But context is going to tell. Listen, why am I doing this? Because if you're like me, if there's an area in your life that you're struggling with, and you think that it's been off, but you're not sure, and then someone else comes along and says, no, you're not making that up, it's not in your head, you are off and that needs to be corrected, and it sounds too good to be true, it has to be proven me. And what I'm trying to do is I want to show you that we have got to rethink how we think about love. So for example, in Matthew chapter 10, because see, I've been told in material, matter of fact, I even heard one time visiting a church on vacation, a preacher say, God has never instructed you to have an emotional kind of love for him because he can't make you do that. That's like a boy asking a girl to have romantic feelings. And I think that's a horrible, horrible comparison. But let me just give you the passage. So Jesus said, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. That is phileo love. If you want to get technical, phileo is the Greek term. It's emotional. And what he's saying is that if you don't have that kind of love for me, more than you do for your own father and mother, your children, you're not worthy of me. That's phileo. If that doesn't prove it, 1 Corinthians 16:22, if anyone has no love for the Lord, let him be accursed. O Lord, come. That's phileo. That's phileo, brethren. That's a friendship, emotional kind of love. Paul will talk about greet those who phileo us in the faith. Revelation chapter 2, verse 4. But I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had at first. That's agape. Now hold on a second. I thought agape was the higher love that has nothing to do with emotion or anything of that aspect. It just has to do with duty. He just praised them because of their duty. He just praised them because of everything they were doing in the realm of obedience. So why is he, that's in other words, that's what we would say is agape love. Then why is he telling them that they don't have agape love? Okay, listen, you don't need to check the Greek. I think you understand in John 11:36, after Lazarus dies and Jesus weeps and the crowd says, see how he loved him. Let me just ask you this. Without knowing the Greek behind it, do you think that that had some emotion to it? Brethren, of course it did. That's phileo love. Jesus says, for the Father himself phileos you, loves you, because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. You put all this together. Here's what I'm trying to say. We don't need to go to either extreme of this. We need to be balanced about this. Matter of fact, you can check Strong and Thayer, by the way. Whenever they even define agape, they will actually talk about affection. I don't know where we're getting this from. Your love for God is a devoted, principled love. Lord, no matter what I go through, I am yours. I'm going to serve you in the good days, and I'm going to serve you in the bad days. Having said that, as I've come to know you and love you, how can I not have emotion towards you? How could I not feel something for you? I'm going to say something bold. If you don't have an emotion towards God, we need to check what's happening. Have I offended anyone today? So this is something that we need to hear. Because sometimes in fights in the past or fights we get into, we have emphasized so much. And now a person's looking to have emotion, and we call them that they're guilty of emotionalism. There is a time and a place for emotionalism. There are people that are totally driven by how they feel, and that's inappropriate. But brethren, we have got to, why am I going to this? Because whenever you're struggling with feeling a love towards God, and how many of us say, I feel like I'm struggling with my zeal and my that side of it. We're struggling because we've said so many times it's not about emotion. That's ridiculous. Sorry. I'm finding myself now, I get fired up on things to me that matter more than other things. There are a lot of things that I don't get fired up. This is the kind of stuff now that gets me fired up. Because it's hindering growth. So your life, love in your life. I love this passage. And one of the scribes came up and heard them disputing with another, and seeing that he, that is Christ, answered them well, asked him, which commandment is the most important of all? Jesus answered, the most important is, and then again, remember what we talked about last week, the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:4. This was their version of this was their John 3:16 as far as popularity. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said to him, you are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and there is no other besides him. And to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is much more than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And after that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. Listen, I didn't mean to distract by the Greek thing. I hope you understand. And listen, I'm telling you, I'm not a Greek guy. And for all I know, I could have messed up what I just went through, okay? That's the irony behind the whole thing, right? What I'm telling you is that you don't need to show me that for me to know who I'm serving. And for me to know how I feel about him. And for me to understand how he feels about me. And for me to understand what I'm supposed to feel about you. I don't need that. I get it. And people that get it are not far from the kingdom. People that get it are in the kingdom. So I leave you with these three passages. You know the John 3:16. For God so loved the world that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. God loved you. This wasn't just some duty. No one made God create you. He wanted to create you. And then he sees you in trouble and he wants to save you. God says this, I'm going to give you my best, my son. What's the greatest thing that I could offer you? My son. Then Jesus comes and he says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take the most valuable thing to you all, life, right? And I'll give mine for you. There's my love. And if I didn't withhold that, what do you think? Why would you think I would hold anything from you? Now, here's my fun tie. Anytime you think about John 3:16, just put a 1 in front of that and think about 1 John 3:16. And here's the response to that truth. See, it's already given that because of what God does for me, He has my everything. He has my devotion, my duty, my emotion, my friendship. Whenever my emotion is struggling, He's got my responsibility. And He's got it all. He's got me all day, every day, 24/7. How many days are in a year? 360 something. He got it. But see, if He has me, guess who else has me? You have me. 1 John 3:16. By this we know love, that He laid down His life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. Listen, I am committed to you because of my commitment to God. I ask you to join me in that commitment. And let me also say something else, and I'm not backtracking, but I do want to make sure I'm clear about something. In the past, I've told you, I don't think there's anything odd in a local fellowship for people to gravitate towards some other people and form closer relationships. I just think that's human nature. Have you ever told someone, I love you, I love you, but I like you? What you're saying is that, you have my responsibility, you have my duty, love, but also I connect with you. But brethren, what I will say is that while that can happen naturally, that doesn't mean that we don't need to strive to have that friendship love with everyone. That's whenever a natural connection turns into a clique. And we can't have that here at North Collin. I cannot serve you and do good for you only whenever it's easy for me. And I cannot serve you and invest in you only because you're my peeps. I cannot do that. And we're going to get into it when we talk about loving each other, but let me tell you something. We're going to rub elbows and we're going to frustrate one another. And now true love will surface. We'll see. We're going to get to that. Let me end with 1 Corinthians 13, because this is what it's going to require. I'm thinking about, Joel may be, I'm not trying to encroach on this, but he may be reading this not too soon at someone's wedding. First Corinthians 13. This is actually the context is a church who has different spiritual gifts. And they're so proud of their gifts. So proud of them. And they're becoming boastful about them. And it's actually causing divisions in the church of Corinth. And now other people are just feeling like, what good am I? What place do I serve? How am I needed? And as Paul addresses this issue, and he puts things in order. In particular, speaking of tongues, it literally disrupted their service. It was so bad. He says, I'm going to do a pause, and I'm going to motivate them for a moment with the principle of love. Verse 1, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I have delivered my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. I'm going to pick on myself for a minute. I believe it's false humility not to be able to identify gifts of God. I have a gift for being able to teach and a gift to talk about God's word. That's fine. I'm not the greatest, but I have a gift at it. Okay? Fair enough to say? There it is. You really don't care about that gift if you feel like I don't love you, do you? If you feel like I do not have your best interest at heart, or I wouldn't serve you, or wouldn't lift a finger for you, you would say, you can have that gift all day long. It does not mean that you're showing faith or that you love. Having a gift or exercising a gift does not mean that we're loving God or each other. Well, see, that's what was happening at the church of Corinth. So he says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. At my wedding, my dad said that he heard the coolest, the best definition of commitment in his life whenever, I don't know, at one point in his ministry, he heard a guy say that commitment was the elimination of all other possibilities. There is no other possibility. There is no exit door for my love for God. And brethren, there is no exit door in my love for you. There is no exit door, because as soon as there's a possibility to not have love for you, that you see what I'm saying? And so we love each other. We're going to be patient with each other. We're not going to wait for each other to mess up and then tally it against one another. We're going to root for one another. We're going to rejoice with one another. Whenever you're sad, I'm sad. Whenever you're rejoicing, I'm rejoicing. And quite frankly, and the last thing, thank you, you've been very patient. But what I am learning and what I have learned, and I believe you have too, in Jesus Christ, is that love has no boundaries. There's no place that love is not willing to go. And I really need to grow in my love. I mean, and that's the honest truth. I need to grow in my love always towards God and you. Amen? So I hope this has been beneficial to you. May God bless you as you continue to grow in biblical, well-rounded and understood love for Him and for your neighbor. And if you can touch them, they're your neighbor. Everyone around you. Okay, let's...